taking a nap. I already recorded an intro and then the thing stopped recording while I wasn't looking. So, I'm going to tell you how to make a hat, but also I'm giving you the hat. Carly, this is mostly for you. I may post this publicly and it'll be a chaotic vlog / tutorial video. You're going to need a plastic bottle. I've gone for this clear plastic one. It's a 3 litre, so it's got less of a tight curve on it. I think you'd probably struggle with a 500ml. You'd probably be alright with a 2 litre one. You can see all the liquid inside of it. You're going to need some sewing thread and a needle, some sort of heavy thread. This is some crochet cotton, and the associated needle that's big enough to do that. Usual sewing scissorsy type things, and some fabric. I think this one is the outer one because the goal was to have a black and white stripy top hat, and I'm using this as a lining because I think it'll look nice as a lining. I'm gonna cut my own bias tape, so out of this probably, but if you don't want to do that, you also need bias tape. Okay, first off I'm gonna take the label off this. First off I emptied it. It was a really cool intro that I did on camera. I'm going to cut out the shapes. So I want 3 shapes for this. Hopefully I only need 1 bottle, otherwise I'm going to have to go and search through the recycling and hope that we have another one. Inside of this, I'm not spoiled. So I've got to get the top of the hat and the brim of the hat, and then the height of it. Okay, got the top and bottom off. This is all good craft projects. Drawing around a plate. Don't happen to have a plate. I've got a couple of trolling wheels though. That curve at the bottom is still present. Cool. Love that for me. This does show that it's going out quite flat though. Is that too big? I wanted a bigger one. Okay. Let's go with that. Let's see how we go. Let's try the little scissors. Bit. That's going to be the brim. Cut a hole in the middle. Size wise and shape wise, what you're going to be going for is pretty much the exact of what you want. And you're going to have a few mil extra because of the fabric and the way we're attaching it. Some of the other stuff's going to be a bit more rough shapes. Brim piece, a hole in the middle. I'm using this as a template now because that's going to be the size of the piece in the top. It's also going to be, I'm going to try and do the the height of the hat actually, and then I'll do the other one because I think that'll be the easiest way to get everything out of this material. And then we're just going to go up for however tall we want it. I'm going to make it a bit taller than we need because we've got loads of material. And we can cut it shorter if we want something less than that. And just get that last round bit out the top. Okay, so we've got our 3 pieces, the rest of that can go into the recycling. Top of the brim, top of the hat, body of the hat, brim. That is our overall shape. I'm going to take down the height bit from there. That looks about right. Okay, that looks about correct. So let's cut it along there. Okay, next thing, lining. Probably not what you expected, right? I'm going to start with the smallest bit, just because I think that's going to be the easiest, and then I'll show you the rest. I'll do that one kind of on camera, and then I'll do the rest off. So just take the lining fabric and cut roughly around it, but you want it to be a lot bigger than the piece, so I've done an extra centimetre around the edge. And then what you're going to do is a thing that I learned in like making fabric boxes using cardboard. And you can use cardboard for this instead of plastic, but obviously then it's not rain proof because you wanted one that will go out in the rain. So you can wear it while like performing in the evenings at winter. And it might be soggy. Take your heavy cotton thread. Cut off a length. A lot of this is just, it's normal sewing, but we're just aiming at something specific. Tie a knot in the end. Normal sewing situation. And then because this has got a bit of a curve to it still and I want it flat, I'm going to put it so that the curve is against the fabric, and then I'm going to run my threads over the top of it in the hopes that that will also like help to flatten it out. I think it's going to be a bit more obvious on the brim part. So holding my bit of plastic here and then my fabric behind it, I'm going to go through the bit at the edge on like a bit where it's in that seam allowance, I guess. And bring that across the whole piece. And then work my way backwards and forwards. Across. Like that. So the thread's running backwards and forwards, and what that does is then it wraps the fabric around the bit of plastic. And I'm going to go all the way along. I'm kind of going to treat this a bit like a square in this case. And essentially I'm going to go along one edge and then along the other edge, in one direction and then the other. And I'll show what I mean because the verbal description is not great. Important thing is to make sure that you definitely pull too hard and rip through the fabric. So I thought it was going to look really obvious, but there we go. So I've gone kind of that way to pull the threads in, and now I'm going that way. And I'm going to keep going round until everything's sort of neatly wrapped around it. One of the nice things about this is that because there's so many layers of structuring and stuff, you can get away with quite a lot. So like making it super precise at every stage is always an option. Nothing that I ever want to do for myself. But if you have something that's a little bit like imprecise somewhere, you've got quite a lot of opportunities to fix it in the process, which is my fave. So having gone all the way along, I can see that there's a few bits which are still quite loose. This lining fabric doing quite a lot of ripping, which is unhelpful. And after the initial one way and the other way, I'm just sort of grabbing whatever looks like it needs a little bit more stretching. So that's the good side, which is just as is. You can see like there's some looseness here, so I'm just sort of dealing with that. And then that's the kind of structure that we're getting on the other side. Obviously doing a circle is always a bit more work than doing a square or a rectangle. Yeah, that's the basic process of carding it across. You can do something very tidy, I'm sure, but I'm tired. Last week was really busy, and so we're just doing what feels right. Okay. So that is covered. So the good side just looks like fabric in the shape of the piece that I cut. Bad side looks like that. This is actually going to be the inside because this is the lining piece. I'm not sure if there's a nice way to get this a little bit flatter. I was hoping that the tension of the threads would pull it flat. That does not appear to be the case. It's still quite curved. I might go and blast it with a hairdryer and see what happens, because it's not so much of a problem for this, which is little, but it might be more of an issue for a very curved brim. Otherwise it's going to be a hat with a curved brim. So I will give this a little blast with a hairdryer and see what happens, and then cover the rest in fabric in the same way, and then I'll come back. Okay, update time. So the hairdryer worked. It made the plastic warp in a different way, so I ended up with something a bit flatter. The edges curled a bit and it did shrink. So something to keep in mind, but I've ended up with something much flatter and much less like a Pringle, and a this is what the brim looks like, whereas before it was curving the whole way around. So yeah, brim, top, little bit. If you find some way of getting some other flat plastic, you could use that instead and save yourself the bother. For the brim, having done everything in the same sort of way as I did for the first bit, for the tall bit of the hat, I put a bit of sticky tape down. I ran out of green, so I ended up just using clear, but put a bit of sticky tape down to create the right shape, and then I had to sew the fabric into a tube. So I wrapped it around the outside of the tube, sewed along the edge, and then trimmed it so I had the insides out, and then put it in with the inside, with the raw seam edge facing the plastic. So it may or may not be visible, but it's like there. You can kind of see the seam from the outside, but then from the inside you've got the clean edge. That's not more visible, isn't it? So clean edge. I actually didn't have a long enough bit, so I sewed 2 bits together, so it's got 2 seams, but if you have a long enough bit that you cut, then you just end up with that 1 seam on the inside. Okay, next step is to assemble the structure. So because we've got fabric wrapped around the edge of every one of the pieces, we can sew the fabric to fabric. So taking our regular sewing needle, which is already threaded from sewing the little tube together. Usual knot tying situation. See the 2 knots aren't on top of each other. There we go. I'm gonna take these bits with like the raw nasty bit on the outside, and then I'm going through the bit of fabric there on that one, like a full 45-degree angle, and then I'm going to go through the little bit at the top. To bring that together, and then just work around the edge with my little regular stitches going through the fabric but not through the plastic. And what this does is creates the internal structure of the hat. So we've done the structural layer, the lining layer, and then we're just going to have like an outer layer. If you've ever made a corset, you might see that as the same three pieces, lining, structure and outer. So we've essentially assembled it from the inside out. And then we cover up all of the nastiness with a nice bit of outer fabric. This is also good if you, at this stage, if you want to add in any extra additional like hardware that you want poking out, magnetic closures or anything like that for whatever reason, or if you want to put in like clips to attach it to your head or anything, you can sew those on at the end. But if you had something that's more like, got the magnet closures, or like I think of like rivets or whatever, where you push the hole through the fabric and then like bend over the, you have the little bits go through the fabric like that, and then you're like bending them over, but like in the opposite ways. You can put those in at this point because you've still then got access to the back, so you can do all of the bending over, and then it's going to be hidden by the last bit of fabric. So if you have any internal structures at this point that you want to add, then you can. I am not going to do those at this stage. I am just gonna, honestly, Carly, I'm letting you put those on yourself. I've just tied that off as normal. So now I've got tube with a top on it, and from the inside, all nice and clean. You've got the seams that are like there and visible, but there's no like raw edges or anything, and all the nastiness is on the outside. So top looks like that, and then the sides look like that. So I'm going to take my brim piece, put it like that, and I'm going to sew around here. I'm going to do it on the inside, so I'm going to have to make sure that my stitching is a little neat and tidy, because that will obviously be visible in the final bit, although it will be the part that's against the head. It's nice to have it look nice when you take it off as well. And then also this technique can be applied for if you're making like a bigger hat, just as long as you get your structural pieces big enough, You can do this around like a full head size if you want to, and if you don't need it to be rainproof because you're not planning on wearing it outside in October, potentially in the rain for a few hours, then you can use things like cardboard or whatever is your structural piece, and just treat that as it needs to be. Fabric wrapping it makes it a lot stronger and sturdier anyway, so you'd probably survive a light shower before it starts to go a little bit nasty. And even if it does get a bit soggy and it's cardboard, it'll probably be alright as long as you dry it out without it getting too floppy, as long as the brim isn't too massive. Okay, I'm gonna get this last bit sewn on and then I will come back when I've got the whole thing assembled, and we'll talk about how to do the outer piece. Okay, next step. So we've got everything fully assembled. The inside is complete, clean and sorted. The structure is done, so now it's just the outside, and that's the last step. So I've got my outside fabric and I'm cutting it in the same 3 shapes as we did before, kind of roughly. So we've got the top, cut bigger than the top. We've got the rectangle, which is big enough to go around this height of the hat, and the brim, which I've cut the outside. Because this is a stretch fabric that I'm using, because that's right, I've just kind of roughly cut the hole in the middle, and I'm going to stretch it to shape and then secure it. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take this and sew it into a tube. I'm going to use this to get my sizes correct rather than measuring everything and then cutting it sort of precisely. So I'm going to take this, wrap it around the outside and sew it like to fit with the seam facing outwards. And I'm going to make sure that when I've got it on for the next stages, I've got a seam allowance at the top and the bottom to meet with other bits. And then I'm going to put this over the top. This fabric doesn't really have an inside and an outside, so it doesn't matter, but we're going to have the inside facing outwards and then flip it. So put the wrong side in on the inside. I'm going to put my brim bit of fabric on and my top bit of fabric on, and then I'm going to sew it with the seams all outside, conforming to the shape of this. And then when that's done, I'll have this shape in fabric as a separate piece. I'm going to take it off, flip it out, and then it'll just be a case of attaching it around here, and I'll come back when it is time to do that. Okay, so we've got the outer fabric on, and that's hidden all of those little structures there. And now we've got the last little bit of brim to do. I am debating the best way to do this. I had a thought and then I've been changing my mind as we go. So initially I thought I'd just bias bind the edge, so we'd essentially have the curved over edge of this bit of fabric. This would just be raw, kind of sticking out, and then I'd have a bit of fabric that would go around the edge. Kind of like this, that would then be like folded over on itself so that didn't have any raw edges. And so you'd have a little stripy line on the inside, a little stripy line on the outside, and everything would be tidy. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do, because another thing is, because I've got this with the raw edge already here as opposed to like here, I could just fold it and then have like just essentially the same thing, that it would just be folded in on itself, and then just a little whip stitch around the edge would have it just kind of flat, 2 bits of fabric next to each other, and that would work, and that would then be like sufficiently tidy. The only downside about doing something like that, and it's the same as when you're like creating a lining for a bit of fabric or a bit of clothing or whatever, is that while you get the thing looking right on the outside, from the inside sometimes you can end up with the lining kind of going a little bit further, so you end up like from the side you see quite a lot more lining, whereas ideally you'd want it to be a little bit more kind of faced. So I was also thinking if I fold it essentially back on itself and wrap it around like that, that I could then put the raw edge still on the inside, would provide that cover for the edge, and then you just end up with something like that on the inside. I don't know, like I think that could be really cute, but because this is like a hard plastic, it's going to be really hard to put the needle through, because ideally I just want to be sewing fabric to fabric rather than trying to attach any kind of like plastic in as part of the movement of sewing. Unless I kind of whip stitch this bit, I'm a little nervous about not having any kind of structural stitches on the top. So and also because like the fabric isn't, because it's stretchy, it might stretch a bit further, because like I've cut it about the right size to have that raw edge there to be binding it, because that was my initial plan. But because it's stretchy, it may well stretch over, and then I could still whip stitch it. It's just going to be a really awkward shape. So I think I'm going to fold it over so that it's not a raw edge sticking out, whip stitch it round the edge, see how that looks, and then if I want to add some bias binding afterwards, I can do. So I'm gonna do that just with my sewing thread and see how it looks and whether it needs some extra, because also this is quite a plain hat still. It might be that I add some additional decoration to it, or it might be that I leave that to be decided a bit more, because this is a gift hat, it's not for me, it's for Carly. She might have some ideas about what she wants, so it might be that if we had like a ribbon brim here, that might then work to match it to the edge, or like some other decoration, or something on the top, or like this is to be part of her clown outfit for next Halloween. She wanted a bigger hat and she wanted one that was a bit sturdier, so obviously this is as sturdy as it is, and it, because it's sewn, it can then be re-sewn. We're both sewers. If you wanted this to be like a Beetlejuice type thing, you could have the stripy fabric and then you could have like the edge band in green and other bits and stuff like that. So I think I'm gonna whip it round. I might text her and show her a picture of what we've got and see if she wants me to finish it in some other way, because I can cut out little strips of this and finish it stripy. I could use some of the silver, cut out a strip of that and then finish it silver, or I could give it more of a specifically black edge with some form of binding. So I'll get it all attached, I'll drop a text message and I'll see what we think. Alright, I'm gonna call it there. Ta-da! We have one stripy small top hat with an inside lining, which is completely like finished. The only thing visible is the stitching around here, which is obviously still matching and tidy, and which matches the stitching around here. So that is a nice sort of clean edge. Additional changes and decoration art can be made. It doesn't have any clips on it at the moment, so the person I'm making it for has got curly hair. So I don't know anything about putting stuff into curly hair and what clip would be good or whatever. So yeah, look kind of like this when it's on. It's all a little bit wibbly wobbly and slightly imperfect, but reasonably sturdy, definitely like droppable, throwable on the floor. Not going to immediately crumple or anything. If it gets a bit of pressure on it. A lot of pressure will probably take it out, especially like that way, and probably crush it this way without too much work, but should be fairly water resistant, fairly resistant for accidentally throwing a prop at your own head and knocking it off, leaving it behind. Wouldn't survive being trodden on, would survive falling off and kind of getting a little bit smushed up that way. So yeah, that is my semi-tutorial, semi-project vlog video, and when I get this edited I'll pop it up online, and then either it's going to be a private / unlisted video and just be Carly seeing it, or I'll make it public. I don't know. Whatever, I'm tired. Bye.